This is a podcast about one woman's mission to help entrepreneurs and business owners write better business books. Each week, we tackle your writing excuses, because there are excuses too, and help you beat the blank page of doom so that you can write the book that'll grow your life and your business. Now here's your host, Vicky Fraser.
Hello and welcome to the 1000 Authors Show. I am Vicky Quinn Fraser, and this week we are reissuing an old podcast episode called Which Kind of Writer Are You? And the reason I wanted to reissue that at the moment is because, well, basically I'm launching round 2 of my Weird and Wonderful Book Society at the end of this month. And so it seemed like the perfect opportunity to have a little bit of a think about what kind of writer you might be. So tune into this episode, have a listen, then get in touch. Let me know, what kind of a writer are you? Are you a planner, a blurter, an editor as you goer, a collaborator, or a multi-booker? Or are you something else entirely? I would love to know a little bit more about what you write, how you write it, and your writing process. So enjoy. Hello, and welcome to the 1000 Authors Show. My name is Vicky Quinn Fraser, and this is my husband, Joe.
Hello.
Hello. What's the matter, Joe?
We appear to be recording this video on a different platform to normal, and I look weird.
You don't look weird. You look very nice.
Weird.
You don't look any weirder than usual. So yeah, we're on podcast 259.
Oh my God.
I know, right?
Will it ever end?
I don't think so. Not until I'm dead.
Okay.
I think people are going to be hastening that along. So I couldn't really think of anything to talk about today. So I thought I'd do a which kind of writer are you quiz.
Okay.
You know how they have in those awful women's magazines? Like, what kind of lampshade are you?
I am unfamiliar with those types of women's magazines, I think.
So am I. I don't think I know what I'm talking about. Anyway, but before we get into all of that, Joe, what are you reading?
Having finished and loved The Gentleman in Moscow, A Gentleman in Moscow by Amor Towles. Amor Towles?
Amor Towles.
Towles? Amor Towles. And really loved it. I moved on to their previous book, which was called Rules of Civility, which I kind of don't like as much.
I mean, A Gentleman in Moscow is big shoes to fill.
Yes.
And it came after, actually. Rules of Civility was first, I think.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh.
Does that change everything?
Well, that's, yeah.
Because I haven't read Rules of Civility yet.
Well, it bothers me a little bit in the same way that F. Scott Fitzgerald's, what's it called? You know, that book.
The Great Gatsby.
The Great Gatsby bothers me in that I have very little frame of reference in which to place the people, because they all seem to be just absolutely minted and nobbing around on yachts and eating out all the time and just, moving, going off to the Hamptons for the weekend and all that kind of stuff. And it all just feels a bit like an entirely different planet. Whereas
you can relate to A Gentleman in Moscow because he was under house arrest in a hotel, and that's kind of what we spent the last year doing.
Yeah.
Okay, interesting. Cool.
So yeah, I found it a little bit alien. So interesting.
So I've been reading, my fiction read that I've literally just finished is Conjure Women by Afia Atakora. And it's so good. It took me a little while to get into it, I think, but like your book took you a little while to get into it. And she's been touted as, if you miss like Toni Morrison's writing and people like Toni Morrison, then Afia Atakora's writing is kind of not similar, but that same kind of
feels the same.
Yeah, feels the same. It's really good. It's about life in the South on a plantation from the point of view of enslaved women, the Conjure women.
Is it really awful?
It's brutal in places, and you get the rage quite often reading through it, just being like, how and why, can people treat other people this way? But no, it's just a really beautiful story, actually, of women and doing what they do best, which is, shouldering the burden of most things and being just incredible. And it's just a really great story. It's beautifully written, and I loved it.
Okay.
So I'm going to be reading more of that. And that came in my Books That Matter book box. So that's another book that I probably wouldn't have come across my radar. Not easily anyway.
I say it's just been delivered to your door and
yeah. So yeah, I loved it. And my non-fiction read at the moment, I've just finished Word Slut, and I'm just about to start reading What Great Storytellers Know by Bernadette Dewar, which is, I can't say what it's going to be like, but it's only 130 pages long, so it's nice and short, and it's a beautiful little book as well. It feels nice, doesn't it, Joe?
Nice little thing.
Yeah, nice little book. So we're reading that for Bookaholics at the moment. Bernadette Dewar, by the way, is one of Seth Godin's teachers. She teaches classes and things in conjunction with.
On behalf of Seth.
Yeah, or in conjunction with, I think.
In conjunction with.
Yeah. So yes, those are my books. Those are our books for this week. Yeah, sorry we weren't here last week. I just didn't record a podcast.
Just didn't happen.
I just didn't do it. No, because I didn't, and that's fine. It's okay to sometimes not get things done. It's, not going to destroy the world. Anyway, so this week at the Dingle, we're having a very blustery day today.
Yes, I need to go and do a walk around the estate to see if we around the lands.
I explained to Team Moxie people in Power Hour earlier that you were striding manfully about the estate with a saw, and they were like, "Why?" And I was like, "I'm not entirely clear on why." So would you like
because
to explain?
It's a very windy day. The trees are in full, bloom and
full leaf.
The ground's a bit wet because it's been raining all weekend, and it's blowing a gale. So I'm kind of assuming there's going to be some branches down somewhere that need a bit of tidying up. Our
next door neighbour had, she said, "Oh, could you come and help me with the branch?" And what was actually on her summer house was an entire tree limb.
Yeah, it was like
it was like
a foot thick.
Yeah, it was massive.
I popped over with a little handsaw, thinking I'd just snip a couple of things and that'd be that. And
it wasn't. It was a giant.
It was a massive thing that prompted me to needing to fix my chainsaw.
Yeah. But yeah, things that we've been doing. So on Saturday, I spent the day feeling absolutely rotten because on Friday afternoon, I had my first COVID vaccination. Yay!
Nice.
And so I'm very grateful for that. I'm not grateful for the way that I felt on Saturday.
Yeah, you were pretty unhappy about the whole thing, weren't you?
It was just like everything hurt. And I was tired, I haven't felt for a long time. I've never had flu, thankfully. I'm touch wood when I say that. I've never had the flu. So I don't know what it feels like to have the flu. And if it feels like that to have the flu, I don't ever want the flu. So yeah, Saturday I did nothing except for... Oh no, I did drag myself into town on Saturday morning and really, apart from the fact that I got a beautiful butter dish, really regretted it.
Yeah, it seemed like a somewhat frivolous task, but Vicky desperately needed a butter dish.
I did need a butter dish.
Really urgently. So she went shopping for a butter dish.
And I found one in a junk shop. And it was only 12 quid, and it's beautiful cut glass. It's fancy. But on Sunday, we dug out all the flower beds that were just full of grass and weeds.
And you were suddenly fine, weren't you?
Yeah, I woke up on Sunday and it was just like, woo, let's do this.
Yeah, so we've at the back of the house, we've got these stone wall terraces that stop Herefordshire sliding into the back of our house. And they've just become kind of really overgrown and grassy and rubbish.
Because neither of us ever does any gardening apart from the vegetables.
I kind of stride manfully around with a saw, but I don't do much gardening.
And we played D&D in that courtyard, and it just looks a mess. And it would be really nice to be surrounded by really bright flowers and bees and, butterflies and all sorts of things. So we've sorted that. Anyway, today we're talking, that's not the title. We're talking about, that's very confusing. We're talking about which kind of writer are you? Joe, which kind of writer are you?
What kind of writer? And I'm the...
Do you want me to give you some options?
Under list maker.
Well, I too am a list maker, as you know. Okay, I mean, you don't really write, do you? You don't write.
I write technical documents.
But you don't write books.
I don't write books. I write technical documents.
Cool. Okay, so dear listener, which kind of writer are you? Are you the planner, the blurter, the editor as you goer, the collaborator, the multi-booker? I am being silly. There are probably as many types of writer as there are people who write, but I thought I would just loosely categorize people.
Okay.
I probably missed out some large categories, being as I planned this at pace earlier. Planned it. But yeah, so I thought I'd just run through, because also I thought if you can recognize yourself in one of these people, then it might help people to just work with their strengths. I think quite often, and actually, obviously, I do have a serious message beneath all this.
Obviously, because if you didn't, this would be ridiculous entirely.
Well, I don't know. Frivolity is good. But yeah, because I think quite often book coaches and people who give advice on the internet and, other similarly qualified or unqualified people quite often will say, this is the way you have to do it. And sorry, we're just laughing. Noodle is outside and keeps intermittently appearing.
He just pops up from behind the door.
Just like,
hoping that somebody would let him in.
Hello, what are you doing? I'm not letting him in until he does his horrified expression, because that's worth seeing.
Okay.
But yes, anyway, so it bugs me. It grates my carrot when I see people say, oh, this is the way you must do things, and you must fit yourself into this box, and are you this type of writer, you must do it this way. Because I just think that's unhelpful, because there's always going to be people who go, well, I don't fit into any of those boxes, therefore I'm wrong, or I'm doing it wrong, or there's something wrong with me. And I've got a particular hornet in my bonnet about this kind of thing recently, because for my entire adult business owner life, I've kind of been sold by the shouty loud voices on the internet, which is like 90% mediocre white men and 10% noisy girl boss women, all sort of saying, this is the way you have to do things, and then you can do this and you will get like these great results, and you'll sell £1 million doing this and £1 million doing that. And it's never worked for me. And so I've always been like, and it's not that I don't feel like I've failed in business or anything, but I've never got the results that I have expected from the stuff that I have been told. Do you know what I mean? And so my go-to reaction has instantly been, oh, I'm doing it wrong. There's something wrong with me. What's wrong with me? What am I doing wrong? And I don't think actually I'm doing anything wrong. I think it's just that that's not, you don't, people, yeah. So it's like when you see the disclaimer at the bottom, results aren't typical. It's like, well, don't claim those results then, because it's in tiny, tiny things. So you see all of these testimonials that I wonder how many of them are actually real testimonials anyway. And they're not about the substance of the thing. They're about, I made this 5 figures in a week with this launch, or I made, here is my $1 million launch. And what they don't tell you is, how much of that goes to affiliate fees for a start, because if your affiliate program is 50%, then your $1 million launch is actually a 500 grand launch. How much did it cost you, and how many refunds did you get? Because that's the other thing, that it's like those figures are meaningless, and all they do is serve to put the rest of us into this little shame bubble of like, well, why is that not happening for me? What's wrong with me? And there are many, many reasons why not. It's like we all have very different circumstances. So those people who have done $1 million launch have this massive team behind them. They have a massive platform behind them. They don't have a 500 person list. They don't have, a few hundred people following them on Instagram. They have millions of people. And so so all of that stuff has kind of got me thinking about book advice and writing advice, and how, if you could just be this type of person, you can do this thing with this book. And it's all bullshit.
Right.
So I just wanted to do a little bit of a tongue-in-cheek, what kind of writer are you? With the big caveat at the beginning that there are as many types of writers as there are people writing books. But also, maybe you fit loosely into one of these categories.
Or more than one.
Or more than one, in fact, yes, because depending on what I'm writing and why, I definitely fit into more than one of these categories.
Yeah.
So yeah. Okay. Type of writer the first, the planner. This is like the person who can't get started until everything they need to know is planned out in minute detail. They love a structure, a timetable, and they find it quite tough to deviate from it. Do you think that describes you? Are you kind of a planner?
No.
Oh, okay. Is it? Okay.
Yeah.
Just no.
No, I like lists. I like chapter headings. I like broken down chunks of stuff that I'm going to talk about, and then I'll shuffle them all around, and I'll write more and expand on things, and then I'll throw it in front of readers and make them tell me what they didn't understand.
Cool. That sounds a bit like being a planner, but okay, cool.
But the structure and timetables, hell no.
Oh, okay, cool.
He's about to do his face. looks really unhappy. My timetable is generally start about 10 minutes before it's due and finish about a day after that.
Cool. That sounds very stressful. Right. So, and I'm joking slightly in this kind of planner thing, but I mean, one of the things that I teach people, if it suits them, is how to plan a book, how to outline a book, how to get all the detail down, because it can make things much easier. And one of my Team Moxie members, I know, loves planning everything out. She needs to have everything, I know what I'm going to do, and then I'm going to do it. And that's cool because that works really well for her. And there are some advantages to this way of writing. And the advantages are you always know exactly what you're going to do when you sit down to write. You have a rough idea how long it's going to take you.
Yeah.
You have a structure to refer to when you come to start editing, and that's really important. So when you're kind of thinking, where things need to go, does it bear any resemblance to the outline, like we talked about last time, basically. Yeah. And you always know where your book is going and how you're going to get there. And I think that is probably, for me, the most crucial part of a plan, and why I think that everybody should at least have a loose plan.
I think as well, there's a lot to be said for having a finish point.
Yeah, otherwise you've just gone forever.
If you know that there's like 10 chapters to write, and last month you wrote one of them, and the month before you wrote one of them, then this month you're probably going to write a chapter.
Yeah.
And you can see that at a certain point you're going to have this done.
Yeah.
Whereas no plan, and you just keep going, don't you?
Yeah. But there are ways to make plans and use plans if you are not a planner. And that's what I help you. That's what I help people do in my coaching. It's like I will find out what type of a person they are, and then I will work around that type of person. Disadvantages of this planning is that if you don't fully understand the role of a structure, you'll find it a little bit constricting. Because I think quite often people are like, I've got my outline and then I can't deviate from it. And it's like, that's not what it is. So
then they become like this mechanistic thing that just sort of stamps out the words.
Yeah, and that can feel a bit soulless.
Yeah.
So that can be a disadvantage of planning. Also, it just doesn't suit some people's brains. It just doesn't suit the way some people work, which I think is where it then becomes useful to get a little bit of help from somebody to find a structure, because otherwise, you're just going to end up with a big mishmash of words. Which brings me on to the blurter. And I know people as well who write like this, and they write brilliantly. It's like when your words just come tumbling out of your head as and when your thoughts arrive. And these writers tend to prefer to write free-flowing, free-form, and they don't need the security of a structure or outline to get their draft done. And sometimes that is how I write, depending on what I'm writing.
Okay.
So it's a lovely way of writing. So advantages to that is it can feel easier to get yourself into a flow state. There is definitely a freedom to just pouring words out of your head and onto a piece of paper. You don't need to worry about forgetting something, because you can simply write what you think and feel, and it just goes down. Whereas if you're writing to a structure and then something else pops into your head, it's like, I have to go and put this over here. Whereas if you're just free writing,
just put it here.
It just comes out and there it is. So there's lots of advantages to it. There are also disadvantages, because the editing can be epic.
You might have said the same thing several times.
Well, yeah, and it's not necessarily organized. It's not necessarily going to flow at all. It can feel really overwhelming because you've just got all of this stuff. And if there's no kind of structure or organization, I can't imagine having to edit something like that, frankly. It's doable. That's not the way I would choose to write it, but I can help other people edit it, mostly because it's not my job to do it. But I can help them get started. Which, by the way, is where a kind of retrospective structure will come in really useful.
Yes.
So that's where a structure doesn't necessarily have to be done right at the beginning.
I think if by the sound of it, this blurter person isn't really writing their book; they're just emptying their brain onto paper.
No, they can
and
be
then
writing
they assemble a book afterwards.
Well, maybe, but I know I'm working with somebody at the moment who he knows what book he wants to write and who he's writing it for, but he hasn't really had much of a structure, and he is just telling all of the stories in his head at the moment, and we're going to decide, or he's going to decide which ones are going to go in his book, which ones aren't, which ones are going to be changed. And I have encouraged him to tag them and do all sorts of stuff like that, so that you can go find them later.
Don't have to read the whole thing.
Not just put them in one giant Word document. So yeah, there's all of that. But yeah, there's so a couple of other disadvantages. It's easy to lose focus and sight of where your book is going and why. And I think you can end up with loads. It's not necessarily a bad thing to end up with lots of stuff that you don't need, because you can use it somewhere else. But if you end up with too much, I think that can get in the way, which again is where you will find it really useful to have somebody else help you.
Yeah, if you spend 5 years writing 1,000% more than you need, for your book, then your book's just going to be 5 years late.
Yeah.
Later than it could be.
It'll probably take longer. The editing part will certainly take longer if you do it like this. And also writing without a structure can somewhat counterintuitively, I think, inhibit creativity. Because if you're just, if I said to you, write something, you could sit there for hours and just go, where if I said, write something about houseplants, that's much easier.
Sure.
And I'm being a little bit facetious, but because you hopefully know roughly what you're going to be writing. But
I can see that with a plan and a structure and a thing, you can sit down and go, today I shall be writing, this thing.
Yeah.
That's got to be, you've got past all the blank pages immediately. Whereas if you're a blurter, you just sit down to a blank page every time almost.
Well, I would say that if you are a blurter, keep your main message in mind the whole time. So why you're writing the book and who you're writing it for and what you're hoping they'll get out of it. And that will help you to not drift too far from what it is that you want to talk about. So writer number 3, the editor as you goer. Now, I used to really rail against this. I used to be like, stick a piece of paper over your screen, don't edit as you go. And I do still think that you can get bogged down in editing as you write if you're not careful. But I also understand that this is how some people write. Mm-hmm. And I'm beginning to actually understand that that's kind of how I write to a certain extent. Because I used to, again, and this is a symptom of being told what's right and what's wrong, like right and wrong by various people on the internet. It's like, don't ever edit as you write. And actually, that's kind of how I write. And so why fight it? Because I don't think I'm a bad writer. I make my living out of it. So some people just write like that. They can't focus if the previous sentence or paragraph doesn't make sense, or if they haven't got the full meaning of the paragraph. It's difficult for them to move on to the next one. So they edit as they go along, which is cool. And I think that I am quite often one of those people.
What sort of sized unit of words do you edit?
Okay, so
because you don't sit there going, I delete, we delete. Sometimes
I have days like that.
They delete.
I feel attacked right now. No, really, sometimes I have days like that. It's very upsetting. Okay, so here's the thing. Here's how I write. I've never really analysed it for somebody else before, only for myself. So I will sit and write, and as I'm writing my current words, I'll be looking a couple of 2 or 3 paragraphs previous as I'm actually writing. So I'll be reading what I've just written as I'm writing. As I'm writing something else. As I'm writing something else, yeah. And
that's just weird.
Like I say, it's not the way I write always. It's just, the way I write sometimes. But yeah, so I will be reading what I've written, and I'll be like, oh, okay, so that doesn't quite relate to what I'm writing now properly. So I will, finish that paragraph or sometimes a sentence or sometimes half a sentence, and I'll go back and I'll fix it. And then I will do a little bit of tweaking, and then I'll carry on.
Mm-hmm. I love the idea of you're reading a couple of paragraphs up whilst you're writing a couple of paragraphs down. That's just weird.
You know what? If anyone's listening to this, if anyone else does that, will you get in touch with me, please? Because I'm just Joe's made me feel like a freak, which is reasonable because I am quite weird. But I can't think that's such a weird thing. Anyway, so yeah, if you do that, come and join the freak team and let me know. So advantages of writing like this, you get more of a sense of how your book will turn out as you go along. Mm-hmm. There's less editing to do later, so it can feel a little bit less overwhelming when you get to the end of your first draft. Your shitty first draft is less shitty. Mm-hmm. Your first draft feels richer and more full of life because you add nuance as you write. So if you're just getting like facts onto the paper, quite often one of the things that I'll do with clients is we'll go back and we'll start adding colour to it, so it's like a pencil sketch, and we'll start adding paint to it and whatever. And you feel less antsy about typos and mistakes and nonsensical sentences, because if I spot something as I'm reading it just bugs me to the point, like that really annoying habit I have when we're watching a film and I'm like, oh, that person, yeah. What have they been in? And I'll be like, and you'll have to pause it so I can look them up on IMDb, because otherwise, I can't. I need to know where they've been before. Otherwise, it's either that or I sit there going, oh, but is it that person? Has he been in this? What do you think? Who did it? And you're just like, can we not just watch the thing? And I'm like, no. Until you let me look it up on IMDb, I'm going to ruin it. Anyway,
so that's fun.
Disadvantage is a treat living with me. Disadvantages to writing like that, to editing as you go. It can inhibit the flow of writing. So we can get caught up in stuff that really doesn't matter at this stage, like typos and grammatical mistakes and things like that. So I do have to stop myself from
spending all of your time in the edit rather than writing the new stuff.
Yeah. So it is a bit of a fight between me and myself, my inner editor and my inner writer. And it can take longer to get the shitty first draft done. So even though it might take less time to edit, at the end, the shitty first draft takes longer, which can make it feel a little bit like a bit of a longer slog. And I can lose the thread of what I was writing as I go back to correct or rewrite previous paragraphs. So I do think it's important to just be careful to, finish an idea or a cool thought that you've had before you go back. Yeah,
I mean, it sounds like if you're an editor as you go, then you probably shouldn't also be a stream of consciousness.
Yeah,
because that could just be squirrely nonsense, couldn't it?
Yeah, I mean, sometimes what I write is squirrely nonsense, if I'm honest. Sometimes I even put stuff out into public that's squirrely nonsense. I try not to, but it happens. So, type of person, the fourth. Oh, yeah, if you're an editor as you go and you read what you're writing as you write, then let me know, because I don't know if I really am weird or not. Number 4, the collaborator, which writing with other people. Can be an absolute joy, or it can be a real trial, depending on what you're writing and who with.
So how typically do collaborators work? I mean, is it like, I'll take this chapter, you take that chapter, or is it, I'll do the first draft and I'll draft this chapter and you edit it, or is it, you don't both sit there looking at the same keyboard, taking turns pressing keys, do you?
No, that would be really weird.
So what sort of granularity is the collaboration done usually?
I cannot speak for people who write collaboratively, because I'm sure there are, again, as many different ways of doing it as there are people doing it. But I do know that I think the guys who write Publish, Repeat, which is a pretty good book, I think sometimes they take a chapter each and then they'll go back and edit each other's stuff. Sometimes they actually work together on the draft, and so their rough draft will be like, okay, so how's this chapter? They write fiction, by the way, apart from that one book. But yeah, it might be like, I think I remember them saying that they might get together and kind of storyboard out what the chapter's going to be. And so they'll be like, oh, okay, so it's going to be like this, and then they might start writing notes and bits out, and then one of them will usually go away and write the first draft.
Flesh it out,
I think. But yeah, or you could, I've seen people try and kind of write and share online Google Docs before, and I just think that could end up in a bun fight and a half. Because if someone was editing my work as I was writing it, I think I would have to send them a bag of dicks in the post. I really do. So
could be irritating. You should at least be editing a different page.
Yeah. Oh, there are. I tell you what, there are copywriters, and if you're a copywriter listening to this, never ever do this. Like, I'm just like, why would you do this? I've heard copywriters tell stories about, they would be writing copy for a client in a Google Doc. They would give access to the client before it was finished, and then the client would be like making comments on that. It's like looking over the show. It's like, no,
it's like standing behind you, just looking at you.
Why would you do that to yourself? It's like, good Lord. So yeah, you're probably guessing I'm not really a collaborative writer. Because I'm not really talking about accountability. I'm talking about actually writing with someone, and not necessarily kind of writing a chapter each to contribute to an anthology, but writing together. I've like I said, I've tried it. It wasn't really for me. That's cool. It's not for everybody. Advantages, though, you get to bounce your ideas off the people that you're writing with, and you can discover fairly early on what might work and what might not. And also, you don't get all the blame if it's shit. I'm kidding. Encouragement and accountability. It's not just your neck on the line, it's theirs too. So you're more likely to stick to deadlines and things like that.
Yeah, you're not just letting yourself down.
Yeah, you're letting other people down. Disadvantages. Writing by committee can be a disaster for what I hope are obvious reasons. I think you'd end up with something like the current Tory party. Can be clashes of personality or writing styles if you're trying to write with somebody else. And it can get really confusing with more than one person working on something as well. So I don't know. If you've had collaborative success stories, get in touch, tell me about them. I'd love to hear about them. And number 5, the multi-booker. Those writers with more than one book on the go at a time. Hello. I currently have 2 active books on the go and 3 that are kind of lurking in the background eyeballing me.
Right.
So yeah, do you focus on just one book or do you work on more than one altogether? It's entirely up to you, really. Because I know a couple of people who are working on more than one book at the moment. I know one person who's working on like 4 books at the moment.
So yeah, just mean it takes years for anything to emerge.
Well, that is one of the disadvantages. So advantages to working on more than one book at a time. You get to work on what you're most excited about at the present moment, which I think is a worthwhile thing. So you don't have to wait to finish one project to start another interesting one. They can feed into each other and give you better ideas.
Mm-hmm.
And it keeps things interesting. So when you're writing one book and you feel like you're getting really bored with it or your writing is getting stale, you can put it aside and work on another one for a bit. And I don't think that's a bad thing either, because when you're bored, people can tell.
Yeah.
Disadvantages to this is it can be overwhelming to work on more than one project at once. I find it really difficult to work with more than 2 or 3 coaching clients at the same time because I just find it very overwhelming. And similarly with books, I don't mind working on 2 books, but my 2 books are very different. So one of them is my next Mindle, which is going to be about reader journeys and things. But the other one I'm working on is my language lessons nobody asked for, which is entirely different.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, they don't feel like they're too many things at once. It can be really disheartening if you don't finish one soon. Like you said, if it drags on forever.
Yeah, you could just be forever hopping from one thing to another.
Yeah, so I do think there's a bit of a danger with that you will simply abandon your manuscript.
And just never finish.
Yeah, and that is the single biggest thing that happens to most books and most authors, is that they just don't finish their books. Not necessarily because they're working on more than one at once, but that's not going to help. So yeah. That is the 5 types of writers. Obviously, there are millions of types of writers because there are millions of writers. Mm-hmm. But I reckon that's 5 kind of big groups.
Big chunks.
So yeah, whatever your writing style, if it works for you, it's correct. There is no such thing as doing it wrong. If you're struggling to finish a book, there's always a reason and always help to be had. So tell us, what type of writer are you? Do you fall into any of these categories? Do you fall into more than one of these categories? Do you fall into an entirely different category? Hi, Mr. Pheasant.
There is a pheasant marching down the hill.
Yeah, he's very fine.
He's very fine. Looks splendid.
So what's the takeaway, Joe?
Find out what kind of writer you are and embrace it. Don't get pigeonholed into a box. Don't get told how to do it by anybody.
Except me.
Yeah, anybody who tells you you're doing it wrong is incorrect. Find someone who will help you work with your strengths, with your technique and your style. I
think that's the most important thing is, find someone who will, or just, work with your strengths.
Yeah, accept them.
Yeah, accept the stuff. So I spent so long trying not to edit at all as I write. And I'm like, that's just not the way I write.
You spend more time concentrating on that than the work you're doing.
Yeah, and it gets in the way. So, yeah. I hope you enjoyed that episode. And I hope you found it really useful as well, because I think that quite often, we are told that there is one right way to do things. And if we don't do things that way, then we are somehow doing it wrong, or there's something wrong with us, or, whatever. And none of that is true. There are always multiple ways to do almost everything. So I hope that this episode has helped you. I hope that you enjoyed it. And if you did, I would really appreciate it if you could let us know. Leave us a review. Rate and review us on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts. If you have any questions about writing or books or anything that we talk about on this podcast, please give me a shout. You can email me, vicky@moxiebooks.co.uk. And if you are thinking that you want to write your book and you are not sure how to get started, or you've just been something that you've been wanting to do for ages and for whatever reason you haven't got around to it yet, I really recommend you check out my Weird and Wonderful Book Society. We're kicking off round 2 at the end of this month, at the end of November. And it's a 3-month group book coaching program. And you will join an incredible group of people and you will get your first draft or make incredible headway into your first draft done by the end of this 3 months. Obviously depends on how much time you can and will put into it. But I guarantee you will be a hell of a lot further along than you were before. So everybody in the first cohort, a couple of them have basically finished their first drafts and are just now polishing it up and getting it ready to be published. Somebody else has made massive inroads into her first draft and is coming back for round 2. It's been fantastic. I'm really excited about the books that are coming out of this Weird and Wonderful Book Society. So if you would like to know more, please go to moxiebooks.co.uk Weird and Wonderful. And I will, and if you have any questions, give me a shout. Vicky at moxiebooks.co.uk. Have any questions about it at all, give me a shout. We'll book a quick 15-minute call. You can come and ask me anything, check if it's right for you. Otherwise, we will be back same time next week. So have a fantastic week, everybody, and keep writing.
Thanks for listening. You can find links and show notes on the website at moxiebooks.co.uk/podcast, where you can also sign up for the best daily emails in the multiverse and find loads of free resources to help you write your book. We'll be back the same time next week with more tales from the book writing trenches and the latest on what the tiny sheeps have been up to.